My first story for you is a famous story. Probably the first story I ever learned to tell. Learned it when I was in kindergarten, word for word, gesture for gesture. You see, the story started like this. It all began early one morning in Spider Town. The sun had not yet come up. It was still dark, kind of damp as the cool morning dew was still clinging, glistening to all the sleeping spider webs, and not a single web was stirring. Except for the web of Mr. and Mrs. Bitsy. Now, Mr. Bitsy was a very important spider in Spider Town. He was the owner and the operator of the Bitsy Construction Company. Most of the spiders in Spider Town were in the business of construction, as you can imagine, or shipping and receiving. Now, Mr. Bitsy had a large family that he had to provide for, and the littlest child in the Bitsy household was none other than...
Itsy Bitsy.
Itsy Bitsy, that's right. And Itsy Bitsy it was who was up so early this particular morning making such a commotion about that web, because, you see, Itsy Bitsy didn't want to go into the construction business like his dad. Nah. Didn't want to go into shipping and receiving like all the other spiders. Itsy Bitsy was a dreamer. He wanted adventures. He wanted to go where no spider had ever been before. So he got up early that morning because he was going out to climb the water spout. That mysterious water spout that went up along the side of the house, but nobody knew just where it ended. Itsy Bitsy was going to find out. So he was up real early, packing extra webs, getting ready for his climb. And his mother, Mama Bitsy, got up early too. She was worried about little Itsy Bitsy baby. Oh, please don't leave me, my little baby. But he said, Ma, a spider's gotta do what a spider's gotta do. And nothing's gonna stop me. So she said, well, all right, my little baby, but at least let me make you some lunch. You're going to get hungry. You'll have to eat. So she went into the kitchen, and she packed a lunch for Itsy Bitsy of all of his favorite foods. She made him a fly salad sandwich. Then she cut up some grasshopper chips. Then she made her specialty, fresh squeezed moth juice. Ew.
Yeah.
But it's 100% natural. And she packed it all up in a web bag, and she gave it to her boy, and she said, now you be careful, little Itsy Bitsy. Ew, ma, yuck. Well, it was getting kind of late now. The sun was rising over the horizon. The early morning amber light was filtering through the sleeping Spider Town.
With others.
As Itsy Bitsy headed out. Down the silent, sleeping streets he stepped, until he stood before the mouth of the water spout. It rose up in front of him like a great dark cave. He could hear the winds whirring around inside. He was scared, but he didn't go home. He remembered. A spider's gotta do what a spider's gotta do. And nothing's gonna stop me. So he took out some of his web, swung it around over his head, and then he sent it sailing into the darkness. It stuck. So he began to climb. Leg over leg. Over leg, over leg, over leg, over leg, over leg, over leg. Up inside the dark water spout he climbed, higher and higher, never knowing exactly where he was going, just on to explore the unknown up above. And up above, he could see a little sunlight shining through a rusted-out hole in the side of the spout. So when he reached that hole, he looked out and... wow! whole new world opened up before him. He'd never been up this high before in his life. Now he could see, a beautiful landscape, little villages tucked into the foothills of great mountains and rolling green forest and sparkling rivers and a beautiful blue sky and a bright sun shining. It was going to be a lovely day. So he decided to climb the rest of the way out of that little hole in the side of the spout. But he still had a lot of water spout left to climb. So he gathered up his webs and he continued his journey up. This time on the outside of the water spout, where he could enjoy this new view. But as he climbed higher, the sun climbed higher, the day got hotter, and he got tired. Boy, he wasn't even halfway up the water spout, and already he was feeling kind of weak and dizzy and bleh. Well, you know what it's like just before lunch. So he decided to take a break. He sat down on the edge of a ledge on the side of the spout and took his lunch out. Fly salad sandwich, grasshopper chips, moth juice. Oh, that made him feel better. And now that he was refreshed, he was ready to continue his climb again. So he grabbed his web, and he started on up, and up, and up, and up, and up, and up. Oh. A change had taken place during lunch. For no longer now was the bright sun shining above. Oh, no. The day grew dark, as shadows drifted across the land below, and in the sky above huge thunder clouds were forming. They were swelling up like great gray sponges full of water, ready to drench the world. For a storm was coming in closer and closer, and the winds began to blow. But Itsy Bitsy held on as tight as he could for as long as he could until down came the rain, and washed that spider. He was just an itsy bitsy spider. He never hurt anybody. I mean, he wasn't a pinchy-winchy spider. He wasn't a bitey-whitey spider. He was just a bitty spider. And all he ever wanted to do was to climb the water spout. But the rain came down and washed him out. And now he was in the puddle, he was on his back, and his little legs were sticking up and going like that. And he couldn't swim, and the rain was falling down on him, he couldn't stop, it wasn't even fucking even doing about it. But wait a minute. The rain stopped falling. Through the clouds overhead, thin golden rays of sunshine began to cut through the storm to break up the sky into tiny little puffs of cloud that looked like popcorn. A beautiful rainbow formed. It was all red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, as out came the sun. And it began to dry up all the rain, and all the water from all those puddles began to steam up into the sky, and Itsy Bitsy Spider was all right. He was okay. You can relax, I know you were worried. But wait a minute. He was right back at the bottom where he started that morning. Shh. Well, what do you think he did, huh? You think he went home?
No.
You think he gave up?
No.
You think he said, quit?
No.
No, of course not. Because even though he was an itsy-bitsy spider, he had a hero's heart. Well, he wasn't going to let a thunderstorm wash him out, no siree. Remember, a spider's gotta do
What a
spider's gotta do. Nothing's going to stop me. Why, he picked up his web and he started to climb again. One more time, he went on up that water spout, higher than he'd gone before. This time he climbed beyond the roof, beyond the trees, beyond the clouds themselves. Then, well, nobody's seen or heard from him since. But they remember Itsy Bitsy in Spider Town. And some spiders still tell stories about what might have happened to Itsy Bitsy. Why, some say that when he got way up there in that land above the clouds, he met that ferocious spider in the sky, Biggie Wiggy. And they say that every now and then Itsy Bitsy and Biggie Wiggy like to roughhouse and wrestle in the skies overhead, and that is the reason that the thunder when there's a storm. But some spiders say that when he got way up there, he found a beautiful land where all spiders live happily ever after. But whatever became of Itsy Bitsy Spider, he is still remembered down here in Spider Town, and that's why they still sing that song to this day, in memory of the bravery of an Itsy Bitsy Spider. Come on, everybody! Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water. Sad part. How came the rain and why the spider? Happy part. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And courageous. Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the spout again. Goodbye, Itsy Bitsy, wherever you are. And that's the story of the Itsy Bitsy Spider. You know, I learned that Itsy Bitsy Spider when I was really little, and you probably learned it then too. It's a good story to learn when we're very young because, well, we face a lot of water spouts when we're growing up. And we're bound to get washed out from time to time. Yeah. And a story like that is going to help us maybe see those storms through.
Yeah.
When I was in first grade, I lived with my family, of course, in a suburb of Baltimore, Maryland, in Towson, Maryland. And I went to a small schoolhouse, 2 stories with only 8 classrooms, that was at the top of a hill. I could easily walk up there from my house. Well, one spring in first grade, I got kind of washed out, too, like Itsy Bitsy. See, when I was in first grade, I didn't like to have to go to bed right away at night, so I made my mom stay up and tell me another story, and then after she turned out the light, I made her come back and give me a glass of water. I wouldn't want to drink it, I just wanted something else so that she'd come back and talk to me some more. So every morning I'd wake up and there'd be this glass of water sitting by my bed. Well, one spring morning, I was waking up, getting ready for school. The rain of the spring was pitter-patting and trickling down the windows of my bedroom, and you know, the sound of rain can sometimes make you real thirsty. Well, when I woke up that morning, I was pretty thirsty. And right there by my bed was that glass of water. So first thing I did was drink it right down. Boy, that tasted pretty good. But I was still pretty thirsty, you know, so I hopped out of bed, I got dressed, I combed my hair, I ran downstairs, and now when I was in first grade, I really liked to drink strawberry quick. Boy, that was one of my favorite drinks. And so I went right to the cupboard. I got out the box of strawberry quick. I went to the refrigerator, got out the milk. I poured myself a tall glass of milk, and I started spooning that powdered mix right into my milk there. And by the time it had turned fire engine red, I knew it was ready to drink. Oh, I swallowed that down. That tasted so good, I had to have another. Now I was feeling wide awake and ready for the school day to begin because I'd had this glass of water and 2 strawberry quicks. But my mom decided that I really needed something a little more nutritious to get me started on the day, so she made me some toast and I think a little bit of bacon, and she also mixed up some juice for me. Actually, it was an orange drink from a powdered mix that she'd brought at the store. So I was pretty happy to eat that and drink that last orange drink down, too, because I was still pretty thirsty. I got on my galoshes and my raincoat, I got my school books and my lunchbox, and I headed out the door on a wet, mushy spring morning. And I was raring to go, boy. I had a glass of water, 2 strawberry quicks, and an orange drink from a powdered mix. And I started sloshing my way up the hill towards school. The rain had let up a little bit, but the banks of the road were kind of muddy, and there were little streams trickling down with little rainbows from the oil of the cars parked in the driveway, and little earthworms wriggling about. You know how they get washed up by a storm? And as I walked up, I met my neighbor, Walter, who always walked up to school with me, too. And we did something in first grade that I bet a lot of you guys did, too. As we walked to school, we would compare our lunches for the day to see what our moms and dads had packed for us. So we're walking up the hill, and I'm showing Walter what I brought. Well, that day, my mom had given me some cream sandwich Vienna finger cookies. They were one of my favorite desserts. But Walter did me one better, for he had in his lunchbox 2 foil-wrapped root beer fizzies. Now, I don't know if they still make fizzies anymore, but when I was in first grade, boy, I sure loved fizzies. What they were was a kind of effervescent drink tablet. You just drop it into a glass of water, the whole thing fizzes up. The water becomes a sweet, sugary, bubbly soda pop kind of drink. Well, root beer was my favorite flavor, and Walter had 2. So without a second thought, I traded my cookies for one of his fizzies. We made it up to the top of the hill, and we were still kind of early, but the school was open, so we went into our classrooms, and I went right to the sink in the back of our classroom. I got a cup, filled it with water, and I dropped that fizzy in there. It went from clear to a brackish brown, and I knew it was ready, and I drank it down. That tasted pretty good. Now I had a glass of water, 2 strawberry quicks, an orange drink from a powdered mix, and a root beer fizzy from the faucet. And the school bell rang. Actually, there were 2 bells in the morning school, one to warn us to get us all in, and then the other to start our lessons. Well, when the first bell rang, Mrs. Burgess, who was my first grade teacher, said what she said every morning. She said, "Now, students, that was the first bell. Now is your chance to put your books down, take your raincoats off, and if anybody has to go to the bathroom, you'd better go now so we don't have to interrupt our lessons. When the second bell rings, I expect to see everyone back here in their seats." "Yes, Mrs. Burgess." Okay, so everybody went about their duties. I went back to this closet, which was at the back of our classroom, pretty traditional sort of American classroom, big walk-through kind of closet in the back, took off my raincoat and my galoshes, and I started to put my lunch down. But, I was still really thirsty. And I had noticed when I was trading my lunch with Walter that my mom had packed me a thermos of grape Kool-Aid. I really liked grape Kool-Aid, too. And I figured, well, maybe I'll find something else when lunchtime rolled around, because I thought I should have some of that Kool-Aid right then and there. So I sat there with all my extra time drinking capful after capful of grape Kool-Aid while I was standing at the closet. Bring! The second bell rang, and everybody rushed down to their seats, and it was time to get started on the day, and I went on my way, too, with a belly full of a glass of water, 2 strawberry quicks, an orange drink from a powdered mix, a root beer fizzy from the faucet, and some Kool-Aid at the closet. Now, my desk in first grade was not in the front, it was not in the back, it was in the middle at the side, right by the big crank-open windows that looked out across the green grass beside our school. And it was springtime, and that meant that the little Dixie cups were all set in a row along the windowsill with their bean sprouts growing there. And as our school day started, a fresh rain began to fall, pitter-pat, trickle-trickle, on the windows by my desk. Now, the first lesson of the day was usually reading. And when I was in first grade, for reading, we studied the adventures of a boy named Dick, a girl named Jane, and a dog named Spot. We opened our books and we began to read. But the rain was singing to me from the windows. And sometimes the sound of rain can make you feel thirsty. But sometimes the sound of rainwater can make you feel other things. And I wasn't able to pay close attention to the reading lesson because I was thinking about a glass of water, 2 strawberry quicks, an orange drink from a powdered mix, a root beer fizzy at the faucet, and some Kool-Aid at the closet. As we opened our books and began to read, this is Dick. See Dick run. Run, run, run. This is Jane. See Jane run. Run, run, run. This is Spot. See Spot run. Run, run, I gotta go to the bathroom. Mrs. Burgess, please. My hand shot up in the air and Mrs. Burgess put the book down, but it seemed like she shifted into low gear, for all of a sudden she was moving in slow motion. I'm sure it was just the effect of my panicked first grader's mind, but she said, David, didn't I say you should go before the second bell? I said, yes, ma'am, I know, but I gotta go now. She said, very well, you may leave, but hurry back. Thank you. I shot out of my chair and started to run down. She said, walk, don't run. Yes, ma'am. I walked as fast as I could, holding my knees together out the door and across the hall and into the boys' room. I got in there. Somebody was there ahead of me. I said, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. He finished and got out of the way, but wait. It was too late. Oh. I stood there crying, the tears rolling down my face, and I was soaked from head to toe with tears above and drinks below. A glass of water, 2 strawberry quicks, an orange drink from a powdered mix, a root beer fizzy at the faucet, and some Kool-Aid in the closet. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck there where I stood. I didn't know whether I should stay, whether I should go, or what. And as I stood there, crying, one of the older kids from the other classrooms came down the hall and poked his head in the boys' room. He looked at me, he looked at the floor, he looked back at me, he said, yuck! And he ran out of there. And some short time after that, Mrs. Burgess stuck her head through the door, and she wasn't talking in slow motion now. She said, David? Are you all right? I'm sorry. She said, have you learned something from this experience? She said, would you like me to call your mother? Yes, please. She called my mother. My mother drove up the hill, picked me up, and took me home. I got some new clothes, and I got lunch at home, and I came back to school for the end of the day, and the sun broke through the spring clouds, and things were better after that. But I learned my lesson that day. Something about planning ahead and being prepared. For you see, the Itsy Bitsy spider is full of brave, heroic glory. But it teaches a lesson, too, about the laws of nature. For what goes up must come down. And I hope that my story that I've just told you leaves with you no doubt that what goes in must come out.
Go to the bathroom.
And now we'll take a break to go to the bathroom.
Me too.
You know, I think when we're growing up, we need stories like that Itsy Bitsy spider because we need to learn to stand on our own 2 or 8 feet, as the case may be, in a big world. And we learn to be independent. But as we get older, we need to learn to take those great journeys and circle back into the world to find a way to be of service to our community. Which is the case in my next story, which comes from the Ojibwe Indians. It's the legend of Mon-Daw-Minth. Wunza was very hungry. He was so hungry, if you listened careful, you could hear his stomach growling. But not only was Wunza hungry, everyone in his family was hungry too. But not only was his family hungry, all the people were hungry. They were hungry because their world was changing. For no longer did the old ways of hunting and gathering what was wild in the world serve to bring enough food to the people, so they were growing hungrier and hungrier. And it was in this time of hunger and change that Wunza was changing too. He was growing up. He was ready now to graduate from his childhood and to become an adult. He was old enough now for his spirit quest. A time of leaving behind all that was comfortable and familiar, and living alone in the wilderness for 7 days and 7 nights, fasting to find the spirit that would show him his way through life as a man. So he said goodbye to his family, goodbye to his friends, and Wunza went on his spirit quest in the wilderness. And there he wandered across the land, and he wondered about the world. He wondered, how is it that so many things grow out of the soil of the earth, and that some of those things can be good to eat? But after wandering for several days, he was too weak from his own hunger to travel any further, and could only sit beside the small fire that he made, and listen while it sang a crackling song at his feet. You can help me with this if you like. You know how fire crackles. And as the stars came glittering out overhead, Wunza said, "Great Spirit, I know now what I quest for. I quest for a way to bring food from the earth to feed my people." And a strange thing happened for Wunza that night as he sat there between the firelight of the stars and the starlight of his fire. The sky tore open, and down to the earth stepped a strange boy. Unlike any boy Wunza had ever seen before. This boy was tall and slender, with soft, silky hair, and bright green and gold in many layers of his costume. And the boy said, "Wunza, I am Mon-Daw-Minth. Great Spirit has heard your wish and sent me to give you what you need. But first, Wunza, you must wrestle me." Wunza was amazed. Here was help, but he was going to have to fight for it. Although he was weak, he wanted to learn, so he wrestled this strange boy, Mon-Daw-Minth. Wunza, you fell down. "That's okay. I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll wrestle some more." And so saying, Mon-Daw-Minth was gone, and Wunza alone. But the next night, again he sat beside his small fire and listened as it sang a crackling song at his feet. And again the stars came glittering out overhead, and again he said, "Great Spirit, I quest to bring food from the earth for my people." And again the sky tore open, and down to the earth stepped a tall man, broad-shouldered and strong-limbed, with long silk hair falling over his shoulders, a gold beard growing about his square jaw, deep green and gold in many layers of his costume. And the man said, "Wunza, I am Mon-Daw-Minth. Are you ready to wrestle with me again?" Again Wunza was amazed, for now Mon-Daw-Minth was a man. But he wanted to learn, so he wrestled. "Wunza, I know you can do better than that. I will come again tomorrow for the last time, and we will wrestle once more, and if your heart is good, you will have your wish. And again Mon-Daw-Minth was gone and Wunza alone. But the next night, down to the earth stepped an old grandfather. Long yellow-gray hair and beard, faded layers of yellow and green hanging loosely in his costume, the old man said, "Wunza, I am Mon-Daw-Minth. Are you ready to wrestle with me again?" Again, Wunza was amazed. For now Mon-Daw-Minth was ancient and wise, but still he wanted to learn, so once more he wrestled. And a strange thing happened to Wunza that night as he held Mon-Daw-Minth in his grasp. It was as if he could feel the wisdom of that man pass into him, for he could see in his heart a vision of the world and the way it grows, the way roots reach down into the earth and push sprouts up into the sun. And as he felt himself growing strong with this knowledge of the earth, he could feel the old man get brittle in his grasp until Mon-Daw-Minth broke and fell, and for the last time spoke, "Wunza, you have broken me. Now you will have your wish, my son, but you must do as I tell. First you must strip away these old clothes and bury me dead deep in the earth. Cover me over with fresh, soft soil, and clear my grave of all stones and weeds that are there. Tend to me every day, and once a month cover me again with fresh, soft soil. If you do this, Wunza, you will have your wish." And so saying, Mon-Daw-Minth was dead in Wunza's arms. But he did as he had been told. He stripped away those old clothes and buried his friend dead deep in the earth, covering him over with fresh, soft soil, and clearing that grave of all stones and weeds that were there. And so he returned home from his spirit quest in the wilderness. Well, now it was the springtime of the year, and the people left that place in search of food elsewhere, but Wunza did not go with them. He stayed behind to finish his quest and to keep his promise. And so every day he came back to that place, keeping it clear of stones and weeds, and once a month he covered it again with fresh, soft soil. And as the spring passed, and the summer came, and the sun rose high in the sky, and the days grew long and hot, still Wunza was true to Mon-Daw-Minth. The summer, when he came back to that place, he saw, rising up from the ground, "Look! It's Mon-Daw-Minth! He's a boy again!" For there indeed was a tall, slender plant that looked just like Mon-Daw-Minth as a boy. It had soft, silky hair, bright green and gold in many layers, and as it grew there, it gave there a gift to Wunza and his people, and the gift was corn. Corn, which cured their hunger. Corn, which every season after they would wrestle back into the earth in its old age to see it spring up in youth again the following season. Corn, which was the meaning of the Ojibwa name Mon-Daw-Minth, the spirit's gift of grain, the food of wonder. The Legend of Mon-Daw-Minth. Now here is a story which is often told about a poor family that found some gold. Now Jack and his mother were as poor as the dirt, and that's a situation that really hurt. His mother said, "Son, we'll manage somehow. Go out to the market and sell the cow. Tie a tether around milky white. Head out this morning and come back tonight. Head out this morning and come back tonight." So Jack headed out with his cow on a tether when a strange little man hopped out of the heather. He said, "Son, you're a climber. Now I can tell that you'll go far and you'll do well. You got your sights in the heights. You got your eye in the sky. You're a capable, intelligent kind of guy. But to get you started, the thing that you need is a small investment in the form of a seed. A seed grant, yeah, that's what I'd say, is what you need to get on your way. Now in my pouch I got some beans of power. You plant these, son, you'll get more than a flower. You'll get a great stalk as tall as a star. These magic beans can take you far. Now I'll take your cow for the beans, and that's an even trade. And that's the way a stock market gets made. Well, you know the rest. He got home that night, gave his mother a terrible fright. She saw what he'd done, she laid down and wept. But he planted those beans before he slept. And early next morning, to his surprise, there was a beanstalk of enormous size. Well, he hopped out of bed and he started to climb. Reached the top and had a wonderful time till he heard some thunder that made him afeard. For in came a giant with a big stringy beard saying, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But the giant's wife said, "Fee, fi, fo, my foot. Now you sit down and you stay put. I worked all morning to make this feast. Now you eat it and like it at the very least. So eat and keep quiet. Besides, little boys are too rich for your diet. They're all made of sodium, sugar, and lard. And you ever try to cook one, it's much too hard. You can't even get them to wash their face without them getting mud all over the place." So the giant ate his meal and he started to snore. And Jack crept out of the kitchen door. But before he left, he made so bold as to take that giant's bag of gold. Now the bag of gold sure made his mother smile, and they were happy for quite some while. But after a while, he went up that stalk. He hid when he heard that giant talk, saying, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But the giant's wife said, So he ate his meal and he snored once more, and Jack tippy-toed across the floor. He bagged that giant's magic hen, then he climbed on down that stalk again. And now when they tell that hen to lay, they get a gold egg every day. Look, Jack wasn't done, oh no, not yet. There was one thing more that he wanted to get. So he climbed on up that stalk once more, and he hid when he heard that giant roar, saying, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Now, woman, don't tell me that he's not here. I smell, little boy, it's strong and clear. I'll skin him alive, and I'll tan his hide. I'll dip him in batter, and I'll have him fried. But Jack stayed hid. That kid was smart. And after a while, the giant lost heart. He ate his meal and once more slept. And out of hiding, Jack carefully crept to the cupboard in the castle with the harp that sings. But the harp cried out from its golden string, saying, "Help! That woke the giant, who went for Jack. But lickety-split, the kid climbed back. He grabbed his axe, he chopped and chopped, and then that ugly old giant dropped. Well, Jack survived, and his mama, too. And after that, what did they do? Well, Jack became famous in his hometown for spreading his new-made wealth around. For it's just as true now as it was long ago. You gotta spread the wealth for good things to grow. Sometimes, when we make the move from one world into another, we have to make some changes in ourselves as well. In the first days, when the first stories were first forming, there were all manner of creatures that lived in the world. There were the beasts on the land. There were the birds in the sky. And there were the fish in the sea. And there were people like you and me. But they say that in those first days, long ago, there was another world as well. There was a world above, and there was a world below. A world beneath the world. And just as there were people in the world above, they say there were people in the world below. But those people were gremlins. They had long, hairy fingers and sharp, jagged teeth and green, glowing eyes. Now, just as there were animals in the world above, so were there animals in that world below. And the best-loved animal of all the gremlins was the snake. Ooh, they loved the snake. Now, they loved the snake for many reasons. They loved the snake because it had such cool, smooth, scaly skin. They loved the snake because it was just one long, sinuous tail wiggling and writhing back and forth. They loved the snake because of its beautiful diamond-shaped head, its glowing gremlin eyes, its forked tongue, which it was always showing off, and its sharp fangs. And because they loved snakes so much, they thought, perhaps people who live around in that world above would love snakes too, and people should have a pet to care for. So the gremlins made a gift of their snakes to the world above. They gathered up many of their snakes and brought them into our world, which was very nice of them, but people mistook the gift. You know what people said when they saw those snakes? They said, "Ah! A snake! Hit it with a broom! Smush it! Kill it! Yuck!" They beat the snake with their brooms and sent the snake away, and the poor snake went crawling back all bruised and beaten, and when the gremlins saw how the snake had been treated, they cried, They were sad, and they couldn't understand why people didn't like their snakes. Well, they thought about it. They thought, well, people come in all different colors. Maybe snakes should, too. So they gathered up some more snakes, they got out their gremlin paints, and they started painting snakes. They made some snakes bright green. They made some snakes deep indigo. Other snakes they painted with many different colored rings the entire length of their bodies. And onto some snakes they painted diamonds down their backs. And when they'd finished painting all these snakes in all these pretty ways, they gathered them and brought them into the world, hoping that now people would love the snakes. But when the people saw these prettily painted snakes, you know what they said? "Ah! A snake! Hit it with a broom! Smush it! Kill it! Yuck!" They beat the snake again and sent the snake away. And again the snake went back all beaten and battered and bruised, and the gremlins were so happy. The gremlins thought again, well, maybe snakes aren't fashionable enough for people. They noticed how people like to wear all kinds of pretty things. Bracelets and rings, necklaces, ties, ribbons in their hair. They thought, well, maybe they needed to dress up the snakes as well. So again they gathered snakes, and they started to dress them up to make them more lovable for people. They made some snakes long and fat. They made some snakes short and thin. To some snakes they gave musical rattles to shake. Other snakes they gave broad, proud hoods about their heads. And when they had finished dressing the snakes up in these ways, they gathered them together again and brought them up into the world. And just to make sure that people would see these snakes and love these snakes, they placed these snakes everywhere that folks might wonder. Why, they put snakes in the trees, tuck snakes in the tall grasses, under rocks and logs, in the waterways, even from the rafters of barns, so that everywhere folks would go, they would see the snake and love it. But you know what people did? Ah! A snake! A snake! A snake! Hit it with a broom! Smush it! Kill it! Yuck! Again they beat the snake. Again the snake went back. Again the gremlins... Well, still people didn't like snakes. They thought, before they make any other changes in the snake, they'd better do some research and really listen to people and find out what it is they don't like about the snake. So the gremlins made themselves invisible, which was a power they had, and they crept up into the world unseen and unheard to listen in and look at people and find out what they didn't like about snakes. They peered through the windows and listened in at keyholes, and they heard all kinds of complaints, things like, "Oh, my goodness, I just saw a snake, took my breath away, I've got to sit down for just a moment. Ooh, I don't like snakes. You know why I don't like snakes? Well, I'm going to tell you, even if you don't want to know. I don't like snakes because they got that cold, slimy skin all over them. Makes my skin shiver just to think about it. It's not natural. Other animals have got fur or feathers or things like that to cover themselves up with, but no, not the snake. Snake goes crawling around on its belly all naked. It's indecent."
Yeah, well, I don't like the snake either. But the reason I don't like snakes is because, they got them big venomous fangs sticking out of their mouth there like that, right there. There, a snake crawls up to you, gives you one bite, you swell up and die. It's not my idea of a good time.
Yeah, well, I don't like because the snake is, I don't like because you know why?
Why?
Well, because I don't like a snake because it got that forked tongue, which is all pointy and owie looking and everything, and you're always sticking it out at you and everything, going blah, 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 blah. And my mommy told me you're not supposed to stick out your tongue, because that's rude.
Well, actually, the problem with a snake, as far as I can tell, is simply this. Snakes haven't got any ears. So naturally, if you're walking along a path and you come upon a snake, the snake bites you. He's startled. He didn't hear you coming. Oh, no! That's not the problem with snakes at all. Now, the problem with a snake is that it's just a wiggly tail whipping around and back and forth and everything. You know, other animals have got legs and wings and things like that. You know, snakes need those things too. Well, shh. The gremlins heard all this, and now they understood why people didn't like snakes. So they went back to the world below, the world above. They gathered their snakes together again, and now they were ready to disguise snakes to make them more lovable to people. They remembered everything that they had heard. They remembered how people didn't like that smooth, cool, scaly skin, so they covered the snake with soft, warm fur. And there it was, a long, furry tail. But people remembered how, they remembered how people didn't like that tail just wiggling back and forth, so they gave the snake 4 sturdy legs. 2 in the front and 2 in the back, and there it was, a long tail on legs.
That's a lizard.
Well, people didn't like the fact that the snake didn't have any ears, so they gave the snake pointy ears on either side of its demon-shaped head. And people didn't like the fact that there was venom in those fangs there. So the gremlins took the venom out of the fangs, and the snake complained, saying, "Well, wait a minute, how am I going to protect myself when they attack me with their brooms?" So the gremlin said, "Well, we'll give you some extra fangs," which they did, and they hid in its new feet. People didn't like the forked tongue always sticking out there so pointy and owie looking, so they fused the tongue together into a round, fat, lovable tongue. And when they had finished disguising the snake in this way, they brought it up into the world for people to love. And you know what people did when they saw the snake? They said, "Oh, look, it's a pretty little kitty cat." And to this day, the cat is one of the best-loved pets of people. And to this day, few folks stop to notice that still that sinuous tail is wiggling and writhing back and forth, and that cats, just like snakes, love to curl up in the warm sun, to drink milk and to catch mice, and that cats, just like snakes, will be heard to when they're angry, and that still they're constantly sticking out their tongues. But if you gently hold a cat in your lap, you hold back its ears and gently stretch back its fur, you can still see the diamond-shaped head and the glowing gremlin eyes of a snake in disguise. The snake's disguise. It was September of 1965. A storm was brewing off the coast of South Florida, and her name was Betsy. She was a full-force hurricane, sending ahead of her gusty heralds with windy warnings about the coming devastation, singing in the wires and shaking out the palm trees and pelting the coast with the beach sand, and everybody in the neighborhood was busy about their houses like so many ants crawling over their mounds, pulling down the shutters and taping the glass patio doors and clearing away the patio furniture. All the kids were helping, except for Jason. Jason was sitting on the floor of the utility room between the refrigerator and the washer-dryer doing something that had to do with adventure and the dynamic of wind and wheels. Across his lap was an old pine board and a pair of Keith's old roller skates. To one side lay a coffee can spilling out of its cornucopia, a panoply of old nails, bolts, washers. And over his shoulders was his dad's oversized red vinyl rain parka. For this was Jason's dry dock. He was building his Argo. He was hammering the wheels from the roller skates to either end of the pine board to make a skateboard, while Betsy rattled impatiently on the jalousied windows of the utility room door, as if to say, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up!" When he'd finished his skateboard, Jason tucked it up under his arm and headed out. Betsy was waiting for him, nudging at him impatiently and singing to him songs of flying and freedom and power and speed. Well, Jason set the skateboard on the sidewalk, aiming it down the long block towards that distant horizon, and with the red vinyl rain parka over his shoulders and his arms clamped to his side, he stepped steadily on board. Slowly he began to pull out the sides of that parka, like opening his wings, like unfurling great sails, and Betsy began to push. Slowly at first, rattling over the rough cement and clacking over the cracks in the sidewalk and rattling and clack and rattling and clack, and faster now, rattle and clack, 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 clackety-clack, past the fire hydrant, past the light pole, past Johnny Reifsteck's German Shepherd. Faster now, down the block, past Molly and Gay's house, which had a hornet's nest in the front yard. Faster and faster, past a beautiful white house with round stones in the garden and yellow hibiscus flowers. Faster and faster, on into the unexplored regions of the block, past that weird house with the tall weeds and a high fence that was said to have a horse behind it. On, clack, clack, clackety, clack, 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 clackety, clack, faster and faster and faster and faster, and riding on the breath of Betsy's wind, faster and faster, feeling like any moment he would lift up off the ground and go flying into the air. But Betsy banked him into the curb at the end of the block. Jason went falling and sprawling across the edge of the road. He pulled himself up, dusted off, and looked out across a river of asphalt into a brave new world of unexplored islands of suburbia. Cars and kids, people and pets that he'd never known existed before. But then Jason turned slowly and looked back over his shoulder in the direction that he had come. And way off in the distance, he could see a little patch of white and green. That was his home, so far away. Betsy laughed in his face. Poor Jason didn't realize, when he went rushing away from his home so eager to fly, that it was going to be so hard to make his way back again. For now Betsy was not his friend. She was blowing at him, pushing at him, teasing and spitting in his face, trying to keep him farther and farther from home as he shouted for help and Mom, Dad! But every word that came out of his mouth was swept away on Betsy's winds. Help! Jason was alone at the end of the block, and he had to shoulder his way into the wind to fight his way up the block and back towards home, grabbing onto the light poles and the hedgerows around the houses. He ducked around behind the Johnson's house, but Betsy was with him all the way. She lifted him up and threw him against the Johnson's key lime tree. Now, the Florida key lime tree is a thorny proposition. Long, syringe-like thorns jutting out in every angle from every limb clutched onto Jason and held him fast in the tree as he was battered and beaten by the storm, slapped about and spat upon. There he was, clutched like Prometheus of old, Jason, the tragic hero of 52nd Court. But he did not give up. He pulled his arms out the oversized sleeve. He dropped down to the ground and rolled quickly to the Johnson's fence and looked back over his shoulder to see that there was the red vinyl rain parka still hanging in the clutches of the tree as Betsy shook and shook that parka to see what happened to the little boy who had only a moment ago been hanging there. Well, while Betsy had lost sight of Jason, he took this chance to gather his thoughts. There were 2 yards yet to cross. Now, the next yard over was the Merriweathers' yard. They had a clothesline that stretched across the yard, and if it was still up, he could grab onto it and use it to pull himself across. But the yard beyond that was the chain-link confine of Johnny Rifesteck's German Shepherd. The beast of 52nd Court. And beyond that was home. Well, there was nothing he could do about that. He'd have to cross that yard when he came to it. It was now or never. Hesitating, you're lost. Before Betsy caught sight of him again, he leapt up and into the Merriweather's yard. The clothesline was up. He grabbed it just as Betsy saw him again and began to blow. But he didn't let go. Fist over fist, his knuckles whitening as he pulled himself across the clothesline across the yard and remembered all the while the way he had raced Timmy Hogan on the playground at school on the monkey bars with all kids shouting, faster, 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 faster. Finally, he made it to the far end of the yard. He fell down and grabbed onto the chain-link fence and looked into the slathering maw of the monster. Sparkling black obsidian eyes, ears pinched back, thick rolling muscly fur pulled back, revealing yellow canine teeth, and a red slathering hungry tongue. Johnny Rifesteck's German Shepherd. About the dog's neck was a heavy leather collar, and attached to that collar, an iron chain which stretched the length of that yard to a pike driven into the middle of the yard. And all about that pike there was a bare trough of ground marking the monster's orbit about the yard. And beyond the monster was home, like an oasis on the desert. Mom! Dad! Help! Jason very carefully slipped off one of his PF flyers. He threw the sneaker high into the air and across the yard. It clunked against the far fence, and when the dog heard that, he leapt after the sneaker, and Jason took that chance to leap over the fence and start to run for home. Mom! Dad! Help! But Betsy blew him away. Harder and harder he ran against the wind, away from the dog. Halfway across the yard, the dog left the throttled sneaker and leapt for the little boy. Ow! Ah! Jason tore away from the dog, leaving half of his pants leg in the dog's mouth as he tumbled into the backyard of his own home and through his own back door. Home. Safe. Wet. Bleeding. Torn. Tattered. His rain parka lost. One shoe gone. A big bite taken out of his pants leg. But he was home. Safe. Or so he thought. For just then, Betsy lowered herself about that little house with all her hurricane's force, screeching and tearing against the roof and every wall and shuttered window. And Jason knew he was trapped. He made his way into his room and pulled his blankets up about him to try and be as safe as possible as he listened to the storm raging all around his little home. Sometimes Betsy was like a pack of wild wolves howling, ow, 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 ow. Sometimes she was like great eagles diving down upon the house. Sometimes she was like a giant sea serpent lifting out of the sea to gnaw on that house like a bone. Suddenly, with a great screech, Betsy blew out the lights. Pitch dark. Jason could not see his hand in front of his face. The world grew suddenly eerily quiet and still as he was plunged into the darkness. The darkest hour. He was scared. But he didn't panic. He remembered a story that he'd heard that gave him strength to weather the storm, and he sang it to himself. Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain, and the itsy-bitsy spider went up the spout again. He sang himself the song over and over again until he had the courage to face the darkness he was in. And as he sang, it seemed his song charmed the wild world around his house, for the storm came back, broke the silence, but she was not nearly so mean as before, but soft and plaintive. Her voice was now moaning and wailing and whispering to Jason, and as his song seemed to charm, too, the lights back out of the darkness, for his mother passed candles about all the rooms, bringing the soft amber light of candles into his own bedroom, transforming his room into a soft fairy-like castle. And Jason was less afraid now, and he listened to the storm, who was less angry with him. He listened to Betsy's sad songs, for she told him stories about the storms at sea, and how she'd been ripped up from her home in the ocean and sent spinning across the wild, whirling world, homeless herself, raging and tearing about the land, never to know peace, never to know rest. Betsy had been angry with Jason because he had a home of his own to go to, a warm family to rest in, but Betsy would never know rest. She would blow until she was gone. And early the next morning, after the storm, in the still quiet, the dawn broke through the shuttered windows, and Jason let drop the blankets he was holding about him, like dropping a cocoon away. He went to the front door of his house and swung it open to the bright day, and stepped out of his house and spread his arms like great beautiful wings to take in the new world. For Betsy had scrubbed everything clean and sparkling. Little droplets of water were glistening off every surface he saw, catching the morning sun and making tiny rainbows all around his neighborhood. He walked across the swampland of his front yard and stood at the edge of his street, which had now been transformed into an Amazonian river, as the rain water went rushing by his feet and bringing with it all the flotsam and jetsam from the night's storm, little bits of broken screening palm fronds and tiny little yellow hibiscus flowers twirling in little eddies at his feet. And as he stood there feeling stronger and grown up somehow, he felt a little nudging at his feet. He looked down to see a water-soaked pine board with roller skates wheels fastened at either end, wrapped about in a red vinyl rain parka, ready for Jason's next adventure.
Audible Kids hopes you have enjoyed this audiobook. For more like it, check out kids.audible.com.